What is up, everybody? Welcome to Unplugged with Tyler Winters and John Pierman. John Pierman is here. I am here.
I'm here.
We have a great show planned for you. John, let's just dive in here. We got a few topics that we want to discuss.
No foreplay.
No, none.
Stick it in dry.
Yep. We got things to do. We're on a time crunch here, so it's a quickie, you know?
Yep.
Anyways, you guys know what I'm talking about.
What do you mean quickie? I just call that the old regular.
There we go. So we don't really have any news to really share this week. There was a lot of good music out there. Guys, definitely go check out our newsletter site. You get through to it from allpunkedup.com.
We'll tell you exactly what you need to be listening to.
Yeah, also sign up for that newsletter because every week I send out what you should be listening to this week of all the new releases that I think are worthy of your ears. So definitely check that out. Sign up. It comes just once a week. Well, that post comes once a week. Yeah. The newsletter has kind of changed a little bit, I will say.
You've changed.
I've changed a lot. But it used to be that I would just send out one newsletter a week, one email a week, and it had all the relevant news from the previous week that was, worth getting into. It would also share new music releases for that week. Now I've kind of split those up, so the new music releases will come out either on Friday or Saturday. The news portion usually comes out Saturday or Sunday, sometimes Monday, just kind of depends on how much time I have to put those things together. But also throughout the week, you might get one or two extra posts from me, little emails. They're usually kind of newsy, where I share my opinion on the subject, or it'll just be kind of like an opinion piece from me that maybe we don't really squeeze into, these types of episodes. So it's kind of like getting a written form of a possible podcast episode that actually isn't a podcast episode, but it's kind of the same. So if you guys like this show, John and I, giving our opinions and hot takes and stuff, you'll get that in written form as well on other topics that aren't necessarily talked about on this podcast. So it's definitely something that I think you guys would like. So yeah, go check it out at unplugged.allpunkedup.com. So boom.
Easy enough.
Right. So one of the topics that I want to talk about today, John, I came across this on Reddit. So a little Reddit reads for us here. This was in the Fallout Boy subreddit, and the title was Negative Experience at Columbus Show. This was on March 29th. So I thought I'd read it. It's kind of a crazy thing that happened to this female at the show. I want to share it. John and I will share our thoughts, and then we'll read some comments, because this is kind of an unfortunate thing that happened to this lady. So here's what it says. She says, I've been debating on whether or not I should make a post here, but I've seen how supportive this community is, and I'm still pretty shook up about all of this. So I figured this would be a safe space to vent.
I'd read it in her voice, though.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever you think it sounds like.
Yeah, that would be really annoying. She goes on to say, I'd like to preface this by saying that none of this is the guys' fault, meaning Fallout Boy's fault. They put on an incredible show, and I can't describe just how grateful I am to have seen them again. I was extremely excited for this show, as I've been a Fallout Boy fan for over half of my life, going on 11 years now. And every Fallout Boy concert I've been to has been an amazing, unforgettable experience. I've also been through a lot this year, which I won't necessarily get into, and this concert has been one of the few things I was genuinely holding on to and looking forward to. However, the night ended up being one I wanted to forget thanks to a group of drunken adults harassing my friend and I throughout the entire show. She goes on, I began to notice something was off when a group of adults, one man and two women, were making a bit of a scene toward the end of Jimmy Eat World's set, but I initially brushed it off. Once Fall Out Boy's set began, the man would run out into the aisleway, practically charging the stage, to which security would bring him back to his seat and tell him he needed to stay there. He did this nearly every song, with the only consequence being security walking him back. As the night went on, the man dumped his beer down my shirt and onto my friend twice, with the second time being on purpose. Not only was I soaking wet, but so was my merch, chair, keys, etc. And when I turned around, all he did was gesture a crying motion toward my friend and I and laugh. After the second instance of this, I told the usher who was walking in our section, and she simply told the man he needed to calm down, and that was that. But that did not stop him at all. After that, he began kicking my chair and the back of my legs, almost knocking me to the person in front of me, and continued to do so the entire concert. The worst part of all this is when the man pushed me in the head. Punched me in the head. When the
guy from the Greyhound bus.
Apparently. When the blow-up balls were out in the audience, I went to hit one that was directly in front of my face. The man, who was behind me, for context, reached around and punched me as hard as he could in the side of my head and then punched the ball out of my hand. I was already emotional at this concert for numerous reasons. Happy tears, you know? But once this happened, I couldn't hold in my tears, and the happy tears turned into sad ones. I bawled my eyes out the entire concert. I turned around after this, and the man laughed in my face and called my friend and I the Antichrist, which he also continued to do so throughout the evening. I once again notified the usher of what was happening, but the man faced no consequences. He also punched me as hard as he could in the back of the head toward the end of the show. I'm still pretty upset about this, and it was quite scary. My friend and I are both 19-year-old females, and this man, who is probably older than my father, was harassing us the entire concert with no consequences. It's just been hard for me to have the experience that means the world to me be dampened by grown adults who wouldn't control themselves. Long story short, grown man harassed my friend and I for nearly the entire show in Columbus. One, I want to say this was well written, so
sure.
Good job. Very easy to understand what was going on. John, you listened to me read that. I don't know if you read this ahead of time or not, but what are your initial thoughts on this?
I mean, the Ushers did a terrible job.
Absolutely.
I mean, you think by the second time or third time he just came barreling down the walkway, they would have, moved him along into the night.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
but yeah, when somebody's committing assaults out in the crowd, it's their job to remove them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I would have, I guess they're in seats and they're not near where like security is. So
most likely,
it's kind of tough. But I mean, for the people around him too, like who's all just sitting there letting all that happen?
Exactly. That's what I have in my notes.
It's pretty terrible.
For one, I don't condone violence at all. But I think in this case, and it's easy for me to say this because it wasn't me, but I think this justifies it. I would have felt, if she and her friend would have turned around and just clocked this guy. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
maybe,
I also want to say if a full-grown man's hitting you as hard as he can,
right,
you would have been asleep. So
true.
Especially in the back of the head. I'm not saying that she wasn't hit, but
Right. No, I know.
It's a bit of an exaggeration, I think. If somebody hits you as hard as they can and you're just sitting there with the back of your head exposed, you would be asleep.
Yeah, because getting hit in the back of your head is the chances of getting a concussion and knocked out is much greater in the back of your head than in the front or side or whatever like that. But yeah, man, like I said, I don't condone violence, but if they decided to get a little violent and punch back or fight back, I would have been all for this.
Yeah.
I do know it sounds like they're 19 years old, so they're very young, and a grown man's can be intimidating to anybody, but especially to a young female. I'm guessing they're, smaller, that sort of thing. So maybe that just wasn't an option for them. But like you said, the Ushers, terrible job. But the main thing here, like you said, certainly people around them would have seen this, and one of the men standing around should have intervened, punch the guy. That's at least one of the options, but get involved,
Yeah, when you have people around you like that and somebody's acting like that, you could beat the fuck out of them and you're going to have 8 people saying it was justified. So I think you're okay.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You see it happen at football games all the time.
Yep. And there's some times where some people just need an ass beaten, and this is one of those instances. Again,
never come to that, but I've definitely turned around and told people they need to shut their goddamn mouths talking at concerts.
But yeah, I feel like
Quiet ones.
the main thing here is shame on the people around who weren't doing anything, because if this was happening throughout the concert, somebody would have seen it.
It's not surprising
Somebody
at
was
a
aware.
Fall Out Boy concert that there wasn't somebody masculine enough to stand up to him.
Right. So let's go ahead and get to the comments and see
It's
what
not a
the
tough
people
crowd,
see.
you know?
Yeah, I know. But you would think somebody would have intervened. I can't believe that nobody did. Not saying that that did happen. I can't believe, if that is the case, that nobody actually did.
Can you imagine if the Rocky montages were backed by Jimmy Eat World? How different they'd be.
Yeah. So this one person says that they should call the venue, report this, and report it to the cops. Absolutely, but I don't think anything's going to be done. How are they going to catch this person? With it being a seated show and scanned in tickets, they'd be able to identify this man. Okay, He physically assaulted you multiple times. Okay, so I guess maybe they would be able to get this person. Totally agree that should be
Tons of
reported.
That's true.
So somebody says, "What the fuck? I'm so sorry. That's absolutely unacceptable for the guy and the venue. Their first reaction should have been to escort him out, or at the very least, keep an eye on him. That shouldn't have happened to you at all." Absolutely. And she replied to this. I was so just, because I didn't want to be like a Karen, you know? But you know what?
It's not
being a Karen.
It's not somebody just being like loud and rowdy. It's like, it's beyond that. So
yeah, at this point, you are defending yourself. Like you can't not defend yourself, you know?
yeah.
I don't care what's going on. You always defend yourself, when it's coming to assault.
Yeah, I mean, if it was your wife being spilled beer on and hit and kicked, I mean, I would hope.
honestly, if it was like me and my wife and that was happening to my wife, I'm actually, I don't want to say scared of what I would do, but it would definitely go. I would definitely start throwing punches.
Yeah.
I
would not. You need to get primal.
I wouldn't be able to. Like, I just feel like that is the only step that is going to put this person in their place.
You need to bite that guy in the face.
Yeah. I need to go Mike Tyson on his ear. So
Bite the fucking shit out of him.
She goes on to say, after saying she didn't want to be a Karen, she goes, I know that I'm a sensitive gal too. After that second beer pour, I was so in shock and taken aback that I finally got the courage to tell the usher. I felt bad too because the usher lady was very kind to my friend and I, but it was the way the man got a slap on the wrist at best each time that made me sad as well, because it clearly wasn't stopping him from doing everything that he was doing. Yeah, this guy seems like he was just getting away with everything.
I mean, all that spilling and assaulting could have been prevented if, the ushers were doing their job correctly and ushered him away.
Yeah, but also like storming the stage during, every song and whatnot, and then just being escorted back to his seat. But also, I want to say too,
it was a peaceful protest.
Drunk.
So he wasn't storming the stage. She was peacefully protesting down the aisle.
Yeah. I do wonder too if this man was like mentally unstable. I know he was drunk.
Yeah, I mean, that's
when you call
my
people
first
the
thought
Antichrist,
was like when they're like, "Oh, it's okay, just sit back down." I was like, it made me think that maybe it was somebody that wasn't
right,
with all their faculties.
Right, exactly. Because I mean, when you're saying you're calling somebody the Antichrist and stuff, like even that doesn't even sound like drunk behavior. That sounds like you're not in your right
unstable
mind. Yeah. So, not to say that this is justified. I mean, even if he was unstable, knock the guy the fuck out. Maybe make him more stable.
Oh, jeez.
What? Sorry. What? Somebody says you are not a Karen. Sensitive is fine, but I would be sensitive too if I had someone's beer. Yeah, she's totally justified in her feelings. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would allot somebody one accidental beer spill. That happens, but
yeah, right. Because that happens. That happens.
Sure.
But if the guy's not showing any remorse for it and just laughing, that's when you might have to get handsy.
Oh. Throwing hands.
Somebody's just saying you seriously need to contact the venue and make a report. She says, I do think I'm going to contact the venue tomorrow. I hope that maybe they'll take action. That's good. If you were assaulted, you should call the venue that hosted the concert. Yeah, everybody thinks that she should definitely report this. I really wish security would have done their job and realized when enough was enough with that guy. This person says, I had a similar experience, but thankfully always at GA shows where I was able to move away from the person. Not possible at a seated event unless you really advocate for yourself and ask they either remove that person or reseat you. I don't mean to imply you should have done that or have any blame in how that went down. Just want everyone to be empowered with an idea in the back of their head. Very good idea. I don't know that I would have thought about that. I would have probably just been thinking this guy needs to go. So definitely a wise thing to keep in the back of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that you've mentioned before too. You know, like at shows, especially punk rock shows, you are supposed to look out for one another.
Yeah.
This
Seated
person
or not.
says, seated or not, especially in the pit, but seated or not. This person says, this pisses me off. We all need to do better and stand up for those around us. If you see this sort of thing happening, please say something. I'm sure the people around you witness this, like we said. We all need to stand up to bullies. No one should have to have this kind of experience. I'm sorry this happened to you. Yeah, it's terrible. I think, like we said, I think the moral of the story is, guys, if you see something, say something and help a person out. Especially like guys, like especially help out women. If you see them being abused, like that's just insane.
Yeah.
Like
and
no
the people
one
that
stepped
were
in.
with him too. It's just all sorts of shit.
Yeah, and especially he had two other women with him, and they didn't do anything. Like these are just some horrible human beings. There is a lot of horrible people out there, and these three were just one of them. So yeah, to the Redditor who posted this, I too feel extremely sorry for you that you went through this.
We're all very sorry.
But it looks like Reddit is responding really well to this, which is always cool to see, the community on here. So really cool. I hope that doesn't prevent her from going to any other concerts, but hopefully she can, be mentally prepared if something like this were to happen again. Say something to the venue. You know what? It wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe even call the cops during the show. I don't know how that would go down, but something's got to be done to these people. And guys, people, if you see something, say something and help somebody out. Yeah, it could have been prevented by security, people around. And she could have asked to move, although I'm sure she was not thinking of that at all. But it really just comes down to the people around her and the venue not acting the way they should. So that really sucks.
There are measures in place.
Okay, so John, let's move on to another topic. So another Reddit post I came across. This one was titled, "Is pop punk becoming too homogenized nowadays?" So is it becoming kind of samey? So I thought we'd talk about this. I want to get your thoughts. Excuse me. So is pop punk becoming too homogenized? And I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. So John and I are going to share our thoughts. We'll read some Reddit comments because this is a good conversation to have.
Glad we're having it.
Yeah. The person says, I get that a subgenre is going to sound a certain way. I just feel like back in the heyday of pop punk mainstream popularity, there was more of a distinction between bands. They sounded similar, but there were always defining qualities about each band. Obviously, NFG, Newfound Glory, couldn't be mistaken for Green Day. Blink couldn't be mistaken for Good Charlotte. Fall Out Boy couldn't be mistaken for My Chemical Romance. Maybe it's a boomer take, but I feel like a lot of the young pop punk bands today sound so similar. It's like they are not trying to have an identity each their own. The production, the guitar tone, the thematic elements, the vocals especially sounds exactly like the next band. It's what I call the Sad Boy 2.0 sound. With this ultra clean tone, mid-tempo, super poppy sound, but doom and gloom lyrics about how life is difficult, sad in most every song. And I swear it's like it could be just one vocalist doing 15 of these bands. The frontmen often look about the same, just like regular dudes without much stage presence to them. I can't distinguish anything specific between these bands, so I can't really get into most of them. I don't know. It's like these guys all heard a band that they like, and so they want to start a band and just do the very same music. But it sells, and these bands get signed, so I must be in the minority to think that the scene is oversaturated with similarity right now. I want to say there's like 15 pop punk bands right now doing the same thing. Where only two only 2 or 3 of them could sufficiently cover the sound that all 15 of them are attempting to capitalize on. The copy of a copy syndrome has gotten out of hand. It goes on. One of the bands I really like right now is Belmont because they've got a fantastic drummer with a unique style, a frontman with a lot of energy on stage and sense of humor, a guitar with some chops, and their music almost transcends the pop punk formula. This is what I like, bands that stick out and have unique qualities about them, but they are a diamond in the rough right now. I don't want pop punk to become like elevator music where it's just a background noise and it doesn't matter who is playing or what song. I don't know, rip me apart and tell me how wrong I am, or tell me that I'm not alone in thinking the genre has a problem. What do you guys think? What do we think, John? I have my thoughts on this. I haven't really read through any of the comments, so I'm curious to see if they agree with me.
I agree with most of it. I think it's kind of formulaic in the way that country kind of became formulaic.
Yeah, I do.
You find something that works, and then everybody just tries to do the thing that works.
Yeah, and I feel like today we are in, like, there's so much of a pool, or I'm sorry, the pool is filled with so many more bands right now because the barrier of entry is very low. If you have a pop punk band, you can get your music out there. Back in the day, in the heyday, like he said, it wasn't easy to get your music out there. You needed a label to get recognized. You 100% needed a label. Nowadays, you don't need that to get discovered because now we have social media and all that. So there is a saturation of pop punk right now. I will agree what he says. It is becoming kind of samey because the more popular pop punk we're hearing, I feel like it's all kind of copying off of each other. I don't know that it's like you can't tell bands apart. I don't really agree with that piece.
I think it's necessary to that level. I think a lot of the songwriting overlaps, and
absolutely.
The way bridges are done, and the transitions between verse, like there's a lot of similarities in like structure,
right?
To me,
yeah.
And at this point, I just want to hear a band that sounds like they can fucking play.
Yes, I agree.
Like I want to hear that they can play. And show me something musically.
Yeah, impress me. Yeah,
it's just not a studio trick,
Right, exactly. And to kind of go off of that saturation of pop punk bands right now, I feel like the opportunity for us to find those unique artists, like he was saying, like the Green Days, the Blink-182s, the Fall Out Boys, and My Chemical Romances, because there's so much. I actually feel like it almost sounds counterintuitive, but because they're all kind of doing the same thing, I think it's harder, even though there's so many more, it's harder to find those unique bands. Yeah. Because right now, the labels back in the day were doing that for us. They were finding unique bands. They're not going to just, pop punk was popular at the time, so they were looking for pop punk bands, but they were also not just grabbing every single pop punk act. There was something about those bands that, like, okay, Blink-182 is blowing up, right?
Yeah.
So obviously that's working. Green Day's already signed, so we're going to push that too.
Well, they're going to sign bands that they think do the same thing.
But can also be unique enough to stand on their own. So, because I'm thinking Sum 41, they came after Blink-182. Somebody saw
Canadian Blink-182.
But they also were doing live shows. They had like trampolines and shit on their
Canadian.
They were doing things to stand out. Nowadays, I don't know that is the case.
I'm looking at it like, what would the record executive say? It'd be like, oh, it's like Blink-182, but they're Canadian. And then you get Yellow Card, and it's like, oh, it's like Blink-182 with a violin.
Yeah, right, exactly. But at the same time, though, those bands all stood on their own, right?
For sure.
You could
they
tell.
had a unique sound too.
Yeah, and that's where I think
somewhat unique.
Where A&R would shine in a way. So I feel like I agree with parts of what this guy's saying, but I just feel like I don't agree with everything. But I do feel like too that labels, like you said, they see what's working now, and because the barrier of entry is so low, I feel like labels might be gobbling up all these artists that are very similar because they know it's working right now. So if they can, instead of putting all the resources into one artist, why not put more of the resources into multiple artists and then see which one catches on? Like they have more of a chance to be successful by signing multiple artists at once, pushing them, seeing who sticks, or whatever. I feel like they could do that in the past, but it just didn't make sense to do that because there's a lot more money being pushed into artists back in the day than there is now. So I think it's easier to push multiple artists now at once than it was to even just do one artist back in the day. So I think that's kind of why we're getting samey too. There's a formula out there. We all know it's all talked about. The labels aren't blind to that. I think it's the label game that's happening right now. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And you could think back to when we were in a band, John, like we would try to mimic Blink-182, you know, like we would try to mimic what we knew
for sure.
So I think that's because there's a saturation of the same sound. Other punk bands are probably just doing the same thing. Like, cause there's so much of the same, maybe they don't, it takes a minute to get your own sound is what I'm saying. So when these newer bands are popping up, maybe they haven't been around a while. So they're trying to find their sound, but in the meantime, they have to play what they know and what they're familiar with. So that's kind of why it's all samey.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're a new band, you're kind of influenced by all the legacy bands coming back and putting out stuff that's kind of, you know.
Yeah. Right.
God, I can't think of the word, but it's, you know, a early 2000s kind of sound still. So, I mean, they're influenced to kind of do the same thing, I think.
Right. If
those legacy bands are successful with it.
Yeah, it only makes sense to do that.
Yeah.
So let's get to some of the comments. This person says, as an older fan, like us, they say, I disagree. There are bands in every era that sound similar. Neon pop punk was especially bad for this sort of thing, in my opinion. I don't really know what neon pop punk is.
I can picture it.
Okay. They go on to say, there are plenty of different sounding bands out there. You just have to find them. As some recent examples, can you really say that Hot Mulligan, Spanish Love Songs, and Arm's Length sound the same? I would say no. Especially Hot Mulligan stands on their own. I mean, those bands all stand on their own. Somebody replies to that, yep, there's plenty of nuance in the genre. Adding a band onto your comment, the Origami Angels, The Brightest Days 2023 album is also fantastic.
Yeah, I think there's different sounding bands out there. You just got to do the work and find them.
Right.
Find what you like.
Exactly.
Or let us do it for you.
And hey, I'm doing that every week with the Unplugged Newsletter. So go sign up, unplugged.allpunkedup.com. Somebody says, for many, this is a feature, not a bug. It's the reason I don't listen to much from the bigger modern pop punk bands, though. But there are plenty of bands from other styles and scenes using pop punk in their sounds and doing cool stuff. They just don't get much representation around these parts. Yeah. This person says, I feel like back in the Blink, Green Day, NFG, Sum 41 era, it was so much harder to find and consume new music. These bands all got big because they were all great and different enough with the same genre. We were just talking about that. If you didn't hear it on the radio or actively seek out articles, compilation CDs, early YouTube days recommendations, iTunes, or whatever, you were not finding new music.
Today, pure volume, baby.
Yeah. Today, there are still plenty of different bands that are killing it and getting mainstream success traction, mainstream in quotes. You then just also have access to hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands of other bands via streaming that, of course, are going to start to sound very similar. That I would almost say that was one of us typing that comment out, but I feel like that's 100% correct. Back in the day, we were fed the music. We were given the music that we were supposed to be listening to. There was nowhere else to get it, nowhere else to find it. You actually had to do the work yourself to actually find bands you liked. If you wanted to get away from the mainstream stuff. And that took going on to the labels' websites, looking at their roster, checking them out on MySpace, or
going to shows because they're affordable.
Going to shows, yeah.
We found bands by seeing openers and stuff like that too.
Right, exactly. The biggest one that I can think of that we found was Mest, opening up for Blink on the Pop Disaster tour. On a side stage.
Or just being at the Warped Tour, you can happen upon a new band too.
Oh, big time. Absolutely. How many bands were found anymore via Warped Tour? It doesn't happen as often, I feel like. So yeah, it was just, It was just a different era. It was just a different time to discover
We're telling
music.
you, it was better.
It was, honestly, dude, it was way better. And like, I don't feel like that's us old types, like just telling the newbies, the young crowd, what it
We've
was
got
like.
it shitty.
It really was, honestly, the last time that music like that, like an era of music was really great to like find the bands and then you invest your time into those bands. Like that just, it won't ever happen like that again until streaming goes away. If streaming ever goes away, but I don't think it'll
happen. Absolutes, but
no, but I don't think it'll happen to the extent that it happened back then in the early 2000s before streaming really hit. So it really was just the last hurrah.
Golden age.
It really was.
Gold rush.
This person says, I think you are just familiar with the artists you grew up with. People mixed up artists like Blink-182, Sum 41, Newfound Glory, Simple Plan, Good Charlotte, and Yellow Card frequently.
Not in my house.
I've seen Fall Out Boy and All Time Low mixed up more than once. I cannot, there's no way I can agree with that. None of those bands sound similar at all. Maybe a couple songs could have at somewhere down the line, but I don't think that's what the person's, the
if
original.
you'd only listened to a little bit of Blink-182 and you heard All Time Low, you'd be like, oh, this new,
Yeah.
If you're an outsider,
A fair weather fan or a casual listener, maybe, but the ones that are in it, like if you love pop punk, you're not gonna mistake any of those bands. Let's see. I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, somebody says, didn't people say the exact same thing about the 2000s pop punk and the 2010s neon pop punk era? How is now any different? I think we've explained why it's different. This person must be, I think this person saying this has got to be a younger person, but who knows? Maybe not.
Pass judgment. Why don't you?
Yeah. Let's end here with this person. I don't know what they're going to say, but they say, I disagree. If you want to find different sounding pop punk bands, they 100% exist. Anxious, Koyo, Hot Mulligan, Arms Length, No Pressure, Between You and Me, Belmont. Mm-hmm. That's a bunch of newer popular bands that have blown up in the last 5 years and don't sound like copies of each other. It sounds like you're listening to a bunch of Magnolia Park-esque TikTok bands. Just don't listen to those bands. It does kind of sound like that. I feel like TikTok is... when they're saying all pop punk is starting to sound the same, I am thinking of those popular TikTok bands. And, and even if I will say too, there's nothing wrong with sounding the same either. No. If that's the sound you're going for, some of those bands, Magnolia Park, I don't really care for like what they're doing now, but their older stuff was great. And there's other bands that might sound the same, but what they're doing is fine if that's what they want to create. Not trying to dog any of these bands or anything like that, but
yeah, well, I mean, somebody has to be doing the best at it.
Yeah, exactly.
You can just say, hey, they're the ones that do it the best.
Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that looks like a lot of people kind of agree with what we were saying. So yeah, all right.
Well, they better.
Yeah. All right, John, I'm going to go ahead and close this one out. Let us know what you guys think. I want to know what you think of the Fall Out Boy thing. And I want to know what you think. Do you feel like pop punk is becoming samey? Let us know.
Similar.
All right, guys, that'll do it for this episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you're really digging our show, please consider helping us spread the word and leaving us a review in Apple Podcasts and or on Spotify. A 5-star review would be greatly appreciated. And please let us know what you like most about the show and what you'd like to hear more of. So with that, we out. Peace.